how many different classes do you teach?
How many classes do I teach, or how many preps do I have? Because that's two different questions now.
Okay. So, I get, break that down. I'm just thinking, a lot of what you post online is sort of the traditional wood shop or some metalworking and things. But if you're also doing robotics, that includes a lot of coding. If you're doing CAD as well, I don't know if you teach it, but I think most of the schools offer an aerospace.
Right. So
class.
I don't teach aerospace, but I teach. All right, let's go. Materials and processes, and that's 1 and 2.
What do you do in that?
That's your traditional shop class.
Okay.
Materials processes is your basic beginning shop class. And then we have manufacturing 1, manufacturing 2, which build on those. Mm-hmm. This year I don't teach production systems, but some years I do.
What do you do in that?
That's your capstone of the
so
materials
put
processes.
All of it together, right?
Manufacturing 1, manufacturing 2, then production systems is, if you're going to take 4 years of traditional shop class, mm-hmm. that's kind of how you would do it.
Okay.
As we go further, there's more mechanization, things like that. Mm-hmm. We use some of the bigger, fancier tools. Then I teach a technical drawing class, architectural drawing class, engineering drawing class. I have the robotics this year. I think that's 7 or so preps that I have. 8. I think I have 8 this year.
So do you teach basically almost every block?
I teach 6 classes.
Okay.
So this year I do teach an extra class.
Right. So are some of those running at the same time?
Yeah,
So you have kids in one half of the room doing one, and
I have my my manufacturing 1 and 2 are together this year. My architectural drawing and my engineering drawing are together this year. It's interesting some days.
Yeah, that's busy. How did you? Okay, so I don't know if this is actually one of the 4 questions, but how did you learn these things? Obviously, some of this, say the robotics and the coding, is something maybe you're learning as you're going. You're learning it to teach it, but this is a really broad base of skills. How did you learn these things well enough to teach them?
I guess for the most part, it was just, my dad is an electrician, so I've always been on job sites and things like that, and been mechanical, for lack of a better word. Starting in middle school, we started in shop class, which was my favorite class, and I got some more skills there. I had a great shop teacher in high school who taught me a lot of the stuff, how to take what I knew and make it better,
right.
Refine it, improve my skills. I spent most of my high school hanging out in a junkyard. I had a friend who was on a race team, and so I was on a race team, and so we hung out in the junkyard, and I was taking stuff apart and just watching and learning, and and then college, I ended up going into technology education. And
where did you go to school?
I started at SUNY Stony Brook, State University of New York, Stony Brook, and then I ended up at SUNY Oswego, which is up north of Syracuse.
All right. Yeah, I know a friend who went to Stony Brook, I think. People always have good things to say about all the SUNY schools. So what did you start? You said you ended up in technology education. What did you do in the beginning?
Well, I never planned on going to college.
Okay.
I was, I think it was the beginning of my senior year. I happened to be at my dad's house one night, and he goes, "What are you doing next year?" I'm like, "Going to work for you." "No, you're not." And honestly, that conversation completely blew me out of the water.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I had zero plans on going to college.
Right.
I expected to be an electrician my whole life.
Did he own his own company?
Yeah.
Okay.
He and my uncle inherited my grandfather's business.
Right.
They've had that Gregory Electric since the 30s on Eastern Long Island.
So Yeah, that's a tricky one. So why did he say no?
The old, you want better for your son than you had maybe,
Right.
or, he didn't want me to rely on somebody else to get paid, in terms of somebody else to pay their bill
Right.
for me to get paid.
Okay.
He vividly remembers and I remember the 80s, but, when it slowed down, the economy slowed down, and he wanted me to have a more stable job.
Right. See, that's, geez, I can't even remember. I was just having this conversation both with a friend in person, and I know who I was talking to there, and then it was someone online going back and forth about sort of and it's not really a myth, but now I say like the myth of the $100,000 welder. You get
It is a myth. It's not a myth.
There are people who do it, and if you know people who work in skilled trades, you can point to some people who make good money, right? And they're saying, actually, I don't know what it was. We were talking about student loans and whether or not people should forgive the debt or not or whatever. And I said, and somebody said, well, you don't have to go to college. Maybe you shouldn't. And I'm like, maybe that's true. I said, but that's not an easy thing to tell someone who's coming out of a working class family when your parents want you to do this thing. And they said, well, why wouldn't you be the electrician? Why wouldn't you do? And I said, I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends like at the Moose Lodge in Berryville who do skilled trade work, and some of them make a lot more money than I do. But if you ask any one of them what they want their kids to do, 100% say they want their kid to go to college. Some of these guys make double what I make and don't pay student loans, and not a single one of them say they want their kid to do what they do.
That's exactly what it was for me. He didn't want me to have to work in the weather, be cold in the winter, hot in the summer. He wanted me to be able to, in his eyes, have a better job. Now, financially, he is much more successful than I am as a teacher. But he did not want me to be an electrician.
Yeah. It's a tricky one. My dad's a really smart guy. He's very good with his hands. He did a lot of shop stuff in school. He has a great story. He got kicked out of his 10th grade English class because he said something to the teacher. And this is back before there were any kind of standards. And the teacher agreed that he would pass him for the year with a B if he never came back. So he went to the shop teacher. So his high school football team, the scoreboard, my dad built and wired the whole scoreboard. He did all this stuff when he was supposed to be in English class. So he can't spell, he can't do anything, but he got good. He had a brother did construction. He did some framing. He owned his own roofing and spouting business for a while, and ended up working for the federal government in distribution, logistics and warehouse stuff. And he always said to me, you don't want to rely on your back, because at some point your back's going to give out. And he said, it'd be great to make a lot of money, but I would rather like going to my job. And he said the only reason he liked going to his job was because he knew he could provide for me and my sisters, right? And I was like, now as I'm older and I have kids, I appreciate that so much more now.
Right.
But that perspective of there are other things you can do and maybe you can make more money, but you should have a better job than this. And I think anyone that argues against it probably wasn't in that position. You say skip college and go do this other job. That's not necessarily bad advice, but I feel like that's advice that comes from someone who took their ability to go to college for granted.
Yes. So then I went to Stony Brook for a couple of years, and I originally thought I was going to be a engineer, and then I took calculus. And when a math problem has more letters than it does numbers, I struggle a little bit. So after that, I was a psychology major because why not? And then I realized I didn't really want to be a psychology major.
I feel like that's how a lot of people land there.
So my stepmother was a elementary school teacher for 30 plus years in New York City. And she goes, you've always liked shop. Why don't you be a shop teacher? And I went, okay.
Yeah. Hey.
And so I became a shop teacher.
Yeah.
I am the last person I would have ever expected to be back in a school.
Yeah.
I was that student that couldn't wait to leave school. Like your dad, I spent a lot of time that I was supposed to be in other classes down in the shop.
Yeah.
And I just never expected to be back in school.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teachers who I think are glad that maybe the shoe's on the other foot now. And
now you get to. That's funny.
I was far from an excellent student. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So I mean, that's funny. I'm gonna say this, and it's probably not true all the time, but I think there are a lot of people who are good teachers who either didn't want to teach or didn't love school the first, when they were going. And I think that sometimes that makes you a good teacher. Like, it makes you sympathetic to the kid that doesn't want to be there.
Oh, yeah.
If you love school, it's hard to understand the kid who's misbehaving, who doesn't want to be there. If you were that kid, you probably handle that guy better in class. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Are you glad you did it?
Became a teacher?
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I love my job. I really do.
Yeah.
And now I really couldn't think of doing much else, other than being an electrician, because I still go up and help my dad on occasions.
Yeah.
He didn't want me to be an electrician, but he's asked for help more than once. So
That's good. That's good. Yeah.